Chain of Command Part 2. Captain Jellicoe tightens the chain of command around Riker's neck as war looms on the horizon.
Cardassian David Warner questions Picard while he is under the influence of a truth serum to try to find out what the Federation is doing along the Cardassian border, but Picard says he doesn't know.
And back on the Enterprise, Jellicoe fears a military confrontation is unavoidable as he continues his negotiations with Gul Lamek, who knows all about Picard's secret mission.
Gul Lamek tells them that Picard and his team killed over 50 Cardassians, including women and children.
He also reveals they have Picard, but not his condition. After Lamek leaves, Jellicoe fills Riker and Troy in on the details of Picard's mission,
and he tells Riker to take a shuttle to the point where the Enterprise was supposed to meet Picard's team in case the others have escaped the Cardassians. Nowhere in this conversation do they ever ask Troy what she might have sensed from the Cardassians, which seems like a stupid oversight on both the part of the characters and the writers. I didn't even realize she was there until like halfway through the scene.
They were having her fixed. She's going to be respectful, compliant, and appreciative, the way a woman should be. I don't actually think that. That's actually a quote from Total Recall, just to be clear. Back in the interrogation room, Picard demands a neutral representative, which David Warner says is on the way, and takes off his handcuffs.
He talks to him about Cardassian archaeology, and says a lot of artifacts had to be sold to pay for their military efforts, and Picard points out that hasn't gone well for them in the past, which pisses him off.
He tells Picard he's a criminal and will be punished, but if he can tell him the Federation's defensive strategies for Minos Corva, he'll make it less uncomfortable.
Picard says he already answered truthfully, but David Warner says he knows the Enterprise would be the command ship in the area in the event of a Federation invasion.
And Picard is forcibly stood up, stripped, and told he has no other identity than simply human.
You will enjoy no privilege of rank, no privilege as a person.
And I wondered if it was standard for Starfleet officers not to wear underwear.
Riker's picked up Beverly and Worf from the rendezvous point and brought them back to the Enterprise. Jellicoe says he wants Geordi to analyze everything from Beverly's tricorder and make sure to mention to actually do it right the first time and not their typical do a half-assed job at first to make it look like you're smart later.
Riker wants to organize a rescue mission, but Jellicoe says they must treat Picard as if he is already dead.
And he says if I wanted him dead, you moron, I wouldn't have dumped him with the Cardassians.
After leaving him hanging the entire night, David Warner lets Picard down to talk to him.
Picard stumbles over for water, which David Warner is drinking out of a wildly impractical cup.
Maybe they're more advanced than we are, where we need a flat surface to put a drink down.
What?
He turns on some lights and asks Picard how many there are. He responds 4, but David Warner maintains that there are 5.
He brings attention to an incision on Picard's chest and says they've implanted a pain device controlled by a remote.
He asks Picard again how many lights there are, and when he says 4, he activates the device.
It will make everything clearer.
Back on the Enterprise, Gul Lamek shows video footage of Picard to Jellicoe, Riker, and Troy,
and says that if they don't admit that the Federation sent him in, he will be treated as a terrorist. But if the Federation agrees to completely pull back, they will let him go. Jellicoe says he will talk to his superiors.
After Lamek leaves, Jellicoe says he's going to reject the offer and tell Admiral Nechayev to deploy more ships along the border.
Technically, she was a vice admiral, but yeah.
Do you know why I'm such a happy person? Because I've got the greatest job on YouTube. As long as the videos keep flowing, I can do anything I want. Anything. I'm just afraid that someday it might end. And you're f***ing making it happen! We need subscribers. Our entire channel effort depends on their loyalty.
That's a little too different, I think.
Depends on their turbinium. Riker goes hog wild, screwing up everything Jellicoe spent a year planning.
He says that Picard should be protected by the treaty, but Jellicoe says that giving in would be a sign of weakness. And Riker says it's his duty to point out mistakes made by a commanding officer, so Jellicoe relieves him of duty.
Jellicoe meets with Geordi and Red Data and wonders why the Cardassians would go through all the trouble to specifically lure Picard there. He thinks that since the Enterprise would be assigned to command the sector if the Cardassians attacked, the Cardassians think Picard would know those defense plans.
He tells Geordi to scan Gul Lamek's ship to find out where it has been recently. Meanwhile, David Warner talks to his daughter in front of a weakened Picard, and they treat him as something less than human. When she leaves, Picard says he's surprised she was allowed in there where her father was torturing someone.
Warner responds that they're all taught about Cardassia's enemies and how they deserve their fate. And the fact is, it's Captain Picard and his terrorists who spread these rumors to undermine trust in the government.
But Picard says that if she learns to devalue someone, she could come to devalue her father. Picard says the Cardassians used to be peaceful.
And Warner counters that peace caused them to starve and suffer. And then Picard counters that by saying their current military takeover has made things worse. Warner says things are way better now, and because of the military, his daughter will never go hungry.
Her belly may be full, but her spirit will be empty.
And Warner tells him in 5 minutes, Picard won't give a shit about the people.
He smacks Picard and starts asking him about the lights again, but Picard is still uncooperative. It's a good thing his robot heart is apparently not affected by the implant.
Geordi finds residue indicating the Cardassians came from a nebula, and the Federation planet Minos Corva is close to it. Jellicoe thinks that's where the Cardassians are hiding out for their attack, so they head that direction.
And Geordi says if there are other Cardassian ships there, they couldn't stay long because they couldn't withstand extended exposure to the molecular dispersion field in the area.
I just said the nebula.
But it's not the...
The stuff in the nebula? I mean, you sound like a character on the show.
I was going to say, the way you're talking about it is like the writers of the show. Where you're just like, who cares?
I mean, I'll put you in saying whatever. Back in the interrogation room, Picard is woken up and said he was dreaming of home.
And Warner asks if those memories are what kept him going.
He says he's never seen someone so strong and tells Picard he's free to leave. So first he tries to kill Picard, and then he lets him get away.
And as Picard is walking away, Warner says they can get what they need from Beverly Crusher.
And they already killed Worf.
Picard tries to tell David Warner that Beverly wouldn't know anything, but Warner says he'll have to find out for himself.
So Picard chooses to stay.
On the Enterprise, Jellicoe tells the officers that Starfleet believes the Cardassians are planning to attack Minos Corva, and he wants to attack the fleet he believes is hidden in the nebula. But Geordi says that any ships there might just be conducting scientific research.
When Jellicoe asks for evidence, they can't give him any, and says the orders have been given, and tells everybody what their job is to prepare for the battle and its aftermath, much to Beverly's displeasure.
And they all talk as if they know there are other ships there, but they don't, so they might just be wasting their time. And Troy again gets no lines.
Back in the interrogation room, Warner is preparing food and offers an egg to Picard. And it's pretty gross looking, but Picard gulps that shit down.
Warner tells him about his struggles growing up.
Constantly hungry, always cold. We slept together in doorways like packs of wild gettles for warmth.
And he talks about how older kids used to beat him up and take his stuff.
Picard tells him it must bring him pleasure to repay his childhood misery by torturing others in a position of power. And whenever he looks at him now, he'll just see a powerless 6-year-old boy.
Which pisses Warner off and causes him to turn on the lights and start questioning Picard again.
Weak and helpless! You cannot hurt me!
Geordi tells Jellicoe he has shielded a shuttle from exposure to the
Effects of the nebula is what I said.
If he can do that, why couldn't the Cardassians? They think the Cardassians couldn't be in there that long, but how do they know that?
And he bonds with Jellicoe over their past shuttle escapades when they were younger.
Doing the Kessel Run and flying through Beggar's Canyon.
Jellicoe says he wants to put mines near the Cardassian ships.
And Geordi says they need to be placed by the best pilot they have, which is Riker.
I would have thought Data, the robot with a computer brain, would be a better choice, but what do I know?
Jellicoe goes to Riker's quarters and awkwardly tries to bring up the reason for his visit. They end up speaking informally and openly admit their problems with each other's attitude. Jellicoe admits that Riker is the best pilot, but he says he won't order Riker to fly the shuttle. So Riker takes the opportunity to be the big dick and tells Jellicoe to ask him to do it. So Jellicoe finally does, and Riker agrees, and then mocks him some more as he leaves.
He and Geordi are placing the mines and flying blind, having some close calls.
Which reminded me of that scene from Bird Box.
What scene would that be?
Where they're in the car with their proximity sensors and they can't see.
Oh, yeah. I treat the movie the way the characters treated the monsters.
I thought you were going to say the way you treated your second child or something. Try to forget all about it.
But they eventually emerge from the nebula and tell Jellicoe they were successful.
Jellicoe contacts Gul L'Mek and says he can blow up all their ships if he wants to.
And demands they leave the area.
Lamech calls his bluff, so Jellicoe has Worf set off one of the mines.
So Lamech says, "No, don't do it. We'll all die. Everybody will die."
And Jellicoe tells them they must also return Picard.
Back in the interrogation room, Picard wakes up and finds the pain remote. He starts to smash it, which could have backfired, if he activated it by accident.
But Warner walks in and says he has other controllers. And he tells Picard the Enterprise has been destroyed and the Cardassians have taken Minos Corva.
Picard says he doesn't believe him and wants to see a neutral representative. Warner tells him there won't be one, and they'll make up a story about what happened to Picard.
He tells Picard he has a choice of either remaining where he is or living out a life of luxury. All he has to do is tell him how many lights he sees. Picard looks at them for a while, and Warner gets increasingly agitated as he doesn't answer.
And right before Picard answers, Lamech enters.
They tell Picard they're going to take him back to the Enterprise.
But right before he goes, he gets an iconic moment of the show in.
There are 4 lights!
On the bridge, Picard retakes his position, and Jellicoe leaves, with no fanfare.
Picard goes to his ready room with Troi. She says she read his report, and he reveals that he left out the choice of more torture or a life of comfort.
And he admits that not only was he about to say that there were 5 lights, but in that moment he actually believed it, showing that he's not fit to command a starship in the first place.
We're under attack. How many ships are there? 4? Chain of Command, Part 2. Overall?
This half of the two-parter was thankfully much better than the first half. Things made more sense, because they focused more on the characters and their decisions than on the dumb fake science stuff. I thought it was interesting that there were no real action scenes in the episode, despite the fact that there were some in the previous episode, which is a great demonstration that action is not what makes a story like this good. Jellicoe turning out to have no ulterior motives made the previous episode look stupider by comparison. If I were grading these after having seen both, I would probably lower my grade for the first one. I liked what they did with Picard and David Warner, and how we learned more about Warner's character as the episode went on, but I think it would have worked better if instead of waiting to introduce David Warner at the very end of the first part, they had done that earlier, and then we could spend more time with the two of them together. As much as I love Ronnie Cox, and Jellicoe's behavior did make more sense here, I thought some of that was still kind of implausible, the way he was acting, especially if he's supposedly the one that negotiated the treaty with the Cardassians before. I wish we could have characters disagree without making the one that we're not supposed to agree with a blatant asshole every time.
Not true. He's one of my best friends. Besides, he's got a big house and a Mercedes.
I did like this part, especially the stuff toward the end, but I thought the Jellicoe side of things dragged it down a bit, and I still didn't think this two-parter lived up to its reputation, but it is a step in the right direction for the season. I gave it a B.
I gave him an A. Jellicoe was still a hard ass, but all of a sudden he wasn't a dick for no reason, so I think he was better in this half. This time it was more of the Enterprise crew just disagreeing, and not even all of them. Geordi, Troi, and Data didn't express any outright aggression the way Beverly and Riker did, so I like Jellicoe as a character much more in this half.
Maybe that's why Troi didn't have any lines. She didn't want to admit that she agreed with everything he was saying, and she liked seeing Riker get shut down for once. She always wanted to do that herself, but she was afraid he'd pull off some of those high kicks.
What is Riker's problem? This isn't the first time we've seen him get overly emotional over Picard, and that's not really a good character trait for second in command of a ship full of guns and space bombs. It also conflicts with a lot of what we've seen before this episode, where he stays rational even in stressful situations. In their conversation with Jellicoe, where they both say what they think of each other, I agreed more with Jellicoe and found Riker to be more of a straight dick this time around. Since they set Jellicoe up as an antagonist in the first half, it didn't really come off the way I think the writers wanted it to. And I really like how Jellicoe left. It seemed much more natural than the direction the show chooses to go most of the time, when routine things are treated with such reverence. I half expected them to have one last conversation where they're both really good friends, because that's only happened 60 or 70 times so far in the show. The part I enjoyed a lot more was the Cardassian stuff. I thought David Warner was awesome, especially how whenever he moved, it was impossible for him to do so without a bunch of leather stretching sounds. The relationship between the two actors was great, but it was silly how easily Picard was able to upset David Warner and get under his skin at pretty much every turn. And I thought it was funny that even as he was being tortured, Picard still has the gall to push the Federation's viewpoints on someone else. And this is another time that Picard has been completely annihilated. Back when it happened with the Borg, That was a long-standing arc and is regularly brought up as part of his character. Will this torture come up again? Probably not.
Yeah, and then when you factor in the events of the Inner Light, Picard should be, just completely insane by this point.
Hopefully this two-parter is a turn for the better.
But I'm not holding my breath.
Well, you wouldn't be able to, because you'd be gasping for air on the surface of Mars. That's not actually a quote, it's more of a sound.